In my previous life, Timothy Yance's female best friend, Selina Sunther, provoked me during my and Timothy's anniversary dinner. Rosalie, Timothy got super drunk 2 days ago, and I was the one who helped him change his underwear. But we're really close buddies, so don't think too much about it. I completely lost my composure at that time, resulting in me hurling my wedding ring away and tearing the marriage certificate into pieces. Later on, I gave up on all of our joint assets just so I could stay away from the shameless pair. In the end, I died in a rehabilitation center located in another country. No one bothered to reach out to me at all. After I got buried, Timothy and Selina worked together to build their business empire. Everyone sang praises about their ethereal love for each other. While people were envious of them for being such a perfect couple, they showed nothing but disdain and mockery toward me when I was mentioned. Timothy's ex-wife never knew how to appreciate him. No wonder she wasn't worthy of him. When I open my eyes again, I've returned to the night of the anniversary dinner. This time, I just smile serenely at Selina instead of breaking down. Then, I turn to link arms with my male best friend, Calvin Solt, whom I've specifically invited to dinner. I even rest my cheek on his chest. Timothy's expression changes drastically, whereas Selina's smile freezes on her face. Calvin merely smiles faintly before he raises his glass to Timothy as a toast. Don't misunderstand our relationship, Timothy. Rosalie and I have known each other for 20 years, so we're used to taking care of each other. Heck, I was also the one taking care of Rosalie the whole time on our first night together, be it in bed or the aftercare. With a loud shattering sound, my husband, Timothy Yance, crushed the wine glass he was holding. The crimson liquid inside splattered onto his expensive tailored suit, along with the glass shards, leaving him looking quite the mess. A dead silence descended upon the entire hall, as everyone's attention turned toward us. Nonetheless, I was unfazed. Letting out a tinkling laugh, I raised my wine glass in Timothy's direction, and met his blazing eyes. Mr. Yance, it looks like I need to congratulate you and wish you a happy marriage in advance. I certainly don't want an unclean man. There's also no need to continue with today's wedding anniversary party. With that said, I turned to leave. However, a hand suddenly clamped down onto my wrist tightly and yanked me back. Timothy's knuckles were white from the force of his grip, as though he wanted to crush my bones. Rosalie Quinton, he snapped through gritted teeth, his eyes completely bloodshot. The usual elegant and poised expression he had was nowhere to be seen. Instead, a fierce scowl replaced his handsome features. Are you trying to turn the Yance family into the laughingstock of society? Mr. Yance. Calvin Solt, my best friend, easily knocked Timothy aside. The amusement in his eyes disappeared as an undeniable air of authority exploded from him. You laid a hand on someone who's mine. Did you ask for my permission first? Timothy's gaze darted between Calvin and I. Nonetheless, I ignored his furious gaze and looked past his shoulder at Selina Sunther, his best female friend who's just like one of the boys. She was standing nearby, wearing a fake expression of concern, showing just enough worry and innocence to look convincing. Still, I didn't miss the smug satisfaction lurking in her eyes, no matter how hard she tried to hide it. In my previous life, she had used this exact expression to deceive everyone, resulting in my death. Withdrawing my gaze, I turned to look calmly at Timothy. Let's divorce. Timothy was briefly taken aback, but then he let out a chilly laugh. Divorce? His jaw was clenched tightly, arrogance practically dripping from his every word. Rosalie Quinton, are there a few screws loose in your head? If you leave me, that lousy restoration studio of yours won't last for more than 3 months before shutting down. He still thought I was the same Rosalie who couldn't live without him, that he could still control every aspect of my life. I didn't bother arguing with him. I merely pulled off the diamond ring on my ring finger. In my previous life, I had thrown it to the ground in a fit of rage. This time, however, I was strangely calm. Once, I had treated the ring like it was the most precious treasure in the world. After all, Timothy had personally slipped it onto my finger when he proposed to me back then. At the time, he had said that it symbolized his promise to me of an eternity together. How ironic. Then let's see who's going to be the first to beg the other. I raised my head and met his bewildered gaze. Then, I didn't spare him another glance as I turned and hooked my arm through Calvin's. Calvin immediately understood my intention and led me away from there, ignoring the countless flashing lights and murmurs from the crowd. Behind us, Timothy's face was as dark as a thundercloud. The engine of a Maybach purred silently in the night. Inside the car, it was so quiet that only the faint sound of the air conditioning could be heard. Calvin didn't immediately start driving. Instead, he cocked his head to the side to level me with an intent look. My dear bestie, I certainly won't allow myself to be used as your shield for nothing. Are you really sure about this? There was a teasing note to his voice, along with a barely perceptible hint of concern. I bowed my head, my fingers idly brushing against the emerald bracelet on my wrist. It had been the only thing Mom left for me, and when it pressed against my skin, it was almost like she was right there by my side, silently comforting me. I suffered a horrible defeat and lost everything in my previous life, I murmured. In this life, I intend to take back everything that belongs to me, and not a single thing less. Hearing that, Calvin didn't press further and drove me back to his place to rest. 20 years of friendship had given him a deeper understanding of my stubbornness and pain than even I had of myself. The next day, instead of heading for my studio first thing in the morning, I returned to the villa that was supposed to be my marital home with Timothy. There were certain items that I needed to personally take back myself. The motion sensor light in the foyer turned on automatically, and I detected the faint scent of a woman's perfume lingering in the air. Besides that, a woman's coat that wasn't mine had been tossed casually over the living room couch, while a half-drunk glass of red wine sat atop the coffee table, a vibrant red lipstick stain on the rim. I didn't allow my gaze to stray as I made a beeline straight for my small workshop on the second floor. My personal restoration tools, the design drafts Mom had left for me, and some personal items. All these were the reason I had to come back myself. I had barely closed the last box when the master bedroom's door swung open. Selina stepped out, dressed only in a loose white men's shirt that barely reached her knees. From the sizing, I could immediately tell that it was Timothy's. Her demeanor was that of the mistress of the house, and when her eyes swept across my packed luggage, her lips curved into a victorious smile. "Oh, Rose, where are you going?" She waved her hand, a small but intricately designed brooch clenched between her fingers. That was the brooch I had designed and gifted to Timothy before we married to commemorate our first date. I used to think that it would bear witness to our eternal love. Tim said that this design is just too childish and doesn't suit his current status. Despite her gentle and soft tone, it was as though her every single word had been dipped in poison. So, as his best female friend, he gave it to me and told me that I could toy around with the design if I wanted. I simply stared at her, not feeling even a single stir of emotion. She had been the same in my past life, using her girl bro identity to hurt me time and again. Walking forward, I reached a hand out toward her. Selina, thinking that I wanted to snatch the brooch from her, instinctively clutched it tighter and put on an aggrieved look. "Rose, don't be like that. I know that you can't bear to part." "Give it to me," I interrupted her calmly. When she noticed my reaction, she assumed that she had achieved her intended goal and placed the brooch in my palm. Once I had it, I gripped it with both hands, exerted force, and as she watched, the brooch snapped with a soft crack. I then said impassively, "Trash belongs in the trash bin." Immediately, all the color drained from Selina's face. I picked up my luggage and moved to walk past her, stopping right as I was beside her. Twisting my head to face Selina, I then uttered in a volume that only the two of us could hear. "Timothy gave you this perfume you're wearing, didn't he? You might not know this, but this perfume is called First Meeting, and was my favorite scent when I was 18. From our proximity, I could clearly see her pupils contract sharply. I quirked my lips into a smirk and added, "So tell me, what do you think he's treating you as?" I didn't wait to see her reaction. I turned and walked away, not even bothering to look back when the sound of something crashing to the floor and shattering echoed behind me. I had only just stepped out the front door when my phone rang with a call from Emma Kinsley, my mother-in-law. I answered my phone, but before I could say anything, Emma's shrill voice was already screaming over the line. "Rosalie Quinton, you sure have some nerve. How dare you cause a scene at your wedding anniversary party? You've thoroughly humiliated the Yance family. I'm warning you, you'd better immediately apologize to Selina, then get the hell back here and admit your mistakes to Tim. The Yance family refuses to acknowledge a shameless, promiscuous woman like you as our daughter-in-law." I couldn't help but feel rather amused at how self-righteously she was lecturing me. Once she had exhausted herself from scolding me and paused to catch her breath, I finally spoke, my tone indifferent. "Are you done? Timothy and I are no longer together." Emma was momentarily shocked into silence, but then she exploded into even louder shrieking. "You dare? Rosalie Quinton, who do you think you are? You're nothing without the Yance family. Where will you find any clients for that lousy studio of yours? I'll ensure that you'll never be able to continue working in the industry." Instead of giving her the chance to yell at me, I simply hung up. However, the Yance family's revenge came a lot quicker than I had expected. In just a few hours, all of my studio's business collaborators called to terminate their contracts. Even some prospective clients with whom negotiations had been progressing well suddenly cut off all contact with us. Shortly after that, rumors started to circulate within the industry about how I had faked my craftsmanship, that the jewelry I restored just looked good on the surface, but was actually poorly repaired underneath. Everyone loved kicking someone who was already down, and rumors were a terrifying thing. My phone practically rang nonstop, with everyone calling to demand an explanation or to cancel their order. At that moment, a chime sounded, indicating that I had received a message. It was from Timothy. "If you come back now and beg me on your knees, I can pretend that nothing happened." The words dripped with that same arrogant tone he loved to use, as though he were doing me a great favor. I stared at the message for a moment, then deleted it without any change in my expression. After that, I opened a password-protected file on my laptop. Inside it was all the evidence I had gathered thus far. The original record of Selina stealing my unpublished design draft to enter a competition, the internal inspection report proving that Yance Corporation's jewelry manufacturing line had used low-grade gold plating to cut costs, and many more. All of these were more than enough to really hurt Yance Corporation. Timothy, do you and your family genuinely think I'm still the same pushover as I was before? I thought. The first thing I did was secure enough money. I dug out the rare gems I had kept hidden away before my marriage, and sent them to an international auction house anonymously. At the same time, I listed the anniversary gift I had originally bought for Timothy on a second-hand luxury marketplace. Within a day, all the money had been deposited into my bank account. Once I had settled that matter, I made an international call to an old friend in the International Jewelry Appraisers Association. I would like to submit an anonymous report about a rising designer whose award-winning pieces are extremely similar in design to the late master jewelry designer, Yvonne Quinton. Around this time in my past life, Selina was enjoying great success, as she had used a series of jewelry named Moon Goddess to win the Starlight Design Award, the most prestigious award in the nation for designers. Because of this, the media had labeled her as a genius designer. However, I was the only one who knew that her so-called Moon Goddess series was nothing but plagiarism. It was actually a copy of Moonlight, the final work of my mother, Yvonne Quinton. Back then, I had expressed my suspicions, but Timothy had used all the resources and connections at the Yance family's disposal to silence every suspicious voice. He then turned right around to berate me for being so malicious out of jealousy for Selina's talent. Eventually, Yance Corporation would achieve great success because of the Moon Goddess series, causing their share prices to skyrocket. This also became the solid foundation upon which Timothy and Selina later built their business empire. My late mother's blood, sweat, and tears ended up being just another stepping stone for Selina's rise to glory, becoming the most glamorous jewelry series in Yance Corporation's portfolio. This time around, I would return everything to its rightful owner. After ending the call, I returned to the villa Mom used to stay in and made my way to her study. Everything in there had been preserved and looked the same as when she was still alive. I went to the safe and carefully took out the original drafts for Moonlight, the yellowed papers bearing my mother's lively strokes. In my past life, I had been so overwhelmed by my grief and despair that I hadn't taken the time to carefully look through these drafts. However, ever since I got a second chance at life, I have spent my nights recalling every detail I can of my first life, hoping to find something that could allow me to turn the tables. It was during one such night that I recalled Mom once telling me that she had a secret habit she had never told anyone about. I ran my fingers over the stack of design drafts. There, tucked within the thickest layer of the drafts, was a sheet of letter paper. It was a handwritten letter, the words written in her distinctively elegant yet strong style. The Moonlight series is a 7-piece set of jewelry. To guard against theft, I used a micro-engraving technique to engrave the initials, YQ, on the hidden inner side of each piece. This shall serve as my proprietary signature mark. When I finished reading it, my hands, still clutching the letter, shook uncontrollably. Wiping away my tears, I took a photo of the letter, then sent it anonymously to one of Mom's close friends before her death, Madame Langdon, the foremost authority in the international jewelry appraisal world. 3 days later, Yance Corporation was holding its annual charity auction dinner at the International Jewelry Exhibition Center. It was a high-profile affair, attended by elites from across the city. The highlight of the night was the final auction piece. The entire jewelry set of Moon Goddess, independently designed and personally crafted by genius designer, Selina Sunther. The starting bid was $1 million. I didn't enter the hall, instead staying in the backstage break room as I watched the live stream. On the screen, Selina was clad in a custom evening gown. She stood on the stage, tearfully explaining her creative inspiration. According to her, her inspiration came from her longing for love. Timothy sat in the first row beneath the stage, gazing up at her passionately. As the camera cut to a close-up of them, the livestream comments section was filled with all sorts of praise, like how they were soulmates or the perfect couple. What a perfectly staged drama. The moment the auction began, the price kept climbing until it reached a whopping $2.8 million. $2.8 million going once. $2.8 million going twice. The auctioneer raised his wooden gavel, and as the crowd buzzed at the climax, right as he was about to bring the gavel down, "Hold it!" a clear, steady voice called out from beneath the stage. The entire hall fell into a stunned, heavy silence. Timothy's hand, which had been raised to bring the wooden gavel down, froze in midair. His eyes darted toward the back of the room, his brow furrowing with a sudden, sharp irritation. On the stage, Selina's radiant, tearful smile went rigid. The spotlight, which had been tracking her elegant custom gown, trembled slightly as the camera operators scrambled to locate the source of the interruption. An elderly woman stood up from the front row of the VIP section. She was dressed in a simple charcoal gray Chanel suit, her gray hair styled in a classic, elegant chignon. Despite her age, she stood with a straight, commanding posture that radiated absolute authority. Madame Langdon, as the foremost authority in the international jewelry appraisal world, her word carried the weight of a royal decree. A single certificate bearing her signature could double the value of any gem on the market. A single word of doubt from her could destroy a fashion house overnight. Madame Langdon? Timothy's voice was polite, though his hand on the gavel began to sweat. Are you entering a bid? The current price is $2.8 million. I am not entering a bid, Mr. Yance, Madame Langdon said, her voice smooth and carrying a cold, heavy stillness that made the surrounding air feel instantly freezing. I am demanding a live inspection of the Moon Goddess series under the authority of the International Appraisal Charter. The crowd erupted into a flurry of frantic whispers. An inspection? But the series has already been verified by Yance Group's internal experts. Why would Madame Langdon demand a live test on stage? Selina took a frantic step forward, her hand reaching up to touch the sapphire pendant resting against her chest. Madam, please. The Moon Goddess was verified. I spent months on the design. I have the original design drafts of Yvonne Quinton's final work, Moonlight. In my hand, Miss Sunther, Madame Langdon said, holding up a leather-bound folder. And according to Yvonne's personal notes, she used a custom, microscopic engraving technique to sign the inner side of each piece in the series. If this is truly your original creation, then why does the back of that sapphire pendant bear the initials YQ? Timothy's face went from pale to a deep, sickly purple. He looked at the heavy, silver-framed microscope assistant Chen's team was wheeling onto the stage under Madame Langdon's supervision. This is ridiculous, Timothy roared, his elegant persona completely shattering as his hand slammed onto the podium. This is a private charity gala. You cannot just bring unauthorized equipment onto the stage and humiliate our guest. Designer. I am the honorary chairwoman of the exhibition center, Mr. Yance, Madam Langdon said, her voice flat. I decide what is authorized on this stage. If Miss Sunther has nothing to hide, she should have no objection to a simple 5-second inspection. The two security guards who had tried to step in front of the microscope instantly froze when they saw the federal marshal badges on the coats of the men standing behind Madame Langdon. Do it, the marshal said, his voice quiet but carrying an iron-cold weight. Selina stood on the stage, her legs shaking so violently she had to grip the edge of the display table to keep from falling. She looked down at the sapphire pendant as the assistant gently removed it from her neck and placed it under the high-definition lens of the microscope. The projection screen behind the stage flickered to life. The blue, glittering depth of the sapphire was magnified 1,000 times, its inner metal backing projected in sharp, clinical detail for the entire audience of 500 elites to see. And there, carved deep into the gold casing in a delicate, lively hand, were two letters. YQ. The crowd gasped. The reporters in the back row descended on the stage like a swarm of locusts, their cameras flashing wildly, capturing the absolute, raw horror on Selina's face. YQ. Yvonne Quinton. Oh my God, she really did plagiarize it. The genius designer is a fraud. And Timothy, he's been promoting her as his soulmate, while she stole his late mother-in-law's work. Timothy fell back against his chair, his eyes wide and vacant as he looked at the screen, then at the door of the backstage break room. The door opened. I walked out of the shadows, dressed in a sharp, tailored black wool suit. My hair was loose, falling in soft waves around my shoulders, and on my wrist, the emerald bracelet Mom had left for me caught the harsh glare of the spotlights. Beside me, holding my hand with a quiet, powerful grip, was Calvin Solt. Rosalie. Timothy whispered, his voice a dry, rattling sound. You did this. I didn't do this, Timothy, I said, my voice projecting clearly through the stage microphones. My mother did. She signed her work 18 years ago so that even if a thief stole her drafts, the world would eventually know the truth. I walked up the stone steps until I stood directly in front of the podium, looking down at him. The Quinton estate has officially filed a copyright injunction against the Yance Group this morning, I said, sliding a document across the wood. All commercial distribution of the Moon Goddess series is frozen and we are demanding a full, retroactive return of all revenues generated under the line. Rosalie, please. Emma's shrill voice screamed from the VIP lounge, her face pale with a mix of fury and panic. He's your husband. We're a family. You're going to destroy his company over a few old drafts. We are not a family, Emma, I said, not even turning to look at her. The divorce papers were finalized this morning. I am no longer a part of your household. And as for the Yance Group, Calvin stepped forward, his voice carrying the calm, absolute authority of the Solt family. The Solt Group has just acquired 45% of your company's outstanding debt. We are calling in the loans, effective immediately. Timothy's phone began to vibrate violently in his pocket. A second later, the assistants on the stage began to receive frantic calls from the corporate headquarters. Mr. Yance, the banks have frozen our credit lines. The shareholders are dumping their stock. We're down 30% in 10 minutes. The regulatory board just announced an emergency investigation into our gold plating standards. The room was in complete chaotic ruin. The charity gala was halted, the guests ushered out of the hall under the watchful eyes of the security guards. In the private holding room backstage, the air smelled of stale perfume and cold sweat. Timothy sat at the heavy wooden table, his head in his hands, his knuckles white. Rosalie, he muttered, looking up at me as I walked in, flanked by Calvin and our legal team. We can settle this. I'll give you the restoration studio. I'll even transfer 10% of the company's remaining shares to your name. Just tell Madame Langdon it was a misunderstanding. Tell her we had a private contract with your mother. A private contract? I let out a soft, dry laugh. Timothy, you really are a pathetic coward. Even now, you're trying to use my mother's name to save your own skin. Tim, don't listen to her. Selina screamed from the corner of the room, her hands handcuffed behind her back as she glared at me. She's just jealous. She's always hated me because we're close. She's doing this to destroy us. Shut up, Selina. Timothy suddenly roared, turning on her with a fury that made her flinch. You're the one who told me the drafts were clean. You're the one who said Yvonne Quinton didn't leave any marks on her work. You've ruined my company. You've ruined my life. I ruined your life. Selina let out a hysterical, sharp laugh, her white silk dress covered in dirt where she had fallen on the stage. You were the one who told me to use them. You knew they were Yvonne's drafts. You had them in your safe for 3 years. You told me that as long as we changed the name of the series to Moon Goddess, no one would ever suspect a thing. You have the text messages, don't you, Selina? I asked, my voice quiet and calm. Selina froze, her eyes widening. Provide them to the prosecutors, I said. If you cooperate fully with the corporate fraud investigation, they might take the conspiracy charges off the table. Timothy stared at her, his face turning from pale to a sickly, translucent gray. He realized then, with a devastating, crushing clarity, that the perfect, ethereal love he had built with his best friend was nothing but a fragile house of cards, ready to collapse at the first sign of a storm. 6 months passed. The Yance Group was officially declared bankrupt, its remaining assets liquidated to pay off the massive copyright infringement penalties and the corporate fraud fines. Timothy's mother, Emma, was forced to sell their family villa to pay off their personal debts, moving into a small, cramped apartment on the outskirts of the city. Selina was sentenced to 5 years in a maximum security prison for corporate theft, fraud, and embezzlement, her name permanently blacklisted from the design world. It was a cold, rainy evening in November. I stood by the window of the newly opened Quinton Restoration Studio in the city center, a warm cup of coffee in my hand. The room was warm, filled with the clean, elegant scent of lavender and fresh polished wood. He's downstairs, Calvin said, walking into the room and placing a soft cashmere shawl over my shoulders. I looked down at the street. Timothy was standing outside the iron gates of the studio. He had no umbrella, no coat, and his clothes were completely soaked, his shoulders shaking from the freezing cold. The once proud, arrogant CEO of the Yance Group had been reduced to a beggar. He fell to his knees in the muddy snow of the street, his hands shaking as he clutched a wet, crumpled letter, the one I had written to him 7 years ago, before I left for the rehab center in my previous life. Rosalie, Rosalie, please. He sobbed, his voice a dry, rattling whisper, over the sound of the rain. I was wrong. I was so blind. I've thrown out. I've turned over all the records to the police. Just, please let me see you. Please forgive me. I walked down the stone stairs, sheltered by the large black umbrella Calvin held over me. When Timothy saw me, his eyes filled with a sudden desperate hope. He reached through the iron bars of the gate, his fingers trying to grab the hem of my trousers. Rosalie, I still have the first meeting brooch. I've kept it safely. We can start over. We have 20 years of history. I looked down at his wet, frozen face, his bloody fingers, and his broken pride. I felt no satisfaction. I felt no anger. I simply felt a clean, beautiful indifference, as if he were a ghost whose name I had long since forgotten. Timothy, I said, my voice carrying clearly over the sound of the rain. The woman who would have knelt in the rain for you died in a rehab center in another country 7 years ago. The person standing in front of you is Rosalie Quinton, and she has nothing left to give you. I turned my back on him, walking up the steps with Calvin, our arms linked, our steps light and free as the heavy iron gates of the workshop locked him out in the cold forever. The grand showroom of the Quinton Restoration Studio was filled with the city's elite, all of them dressed in the finest silks and wools. The air was warm, smelling of expensive champagne and white lilies. The Moonlight series was finally displayed in the central glass case, its blue sapphires catching the warm light of the chandeliers, fully restored to its rightful name and glory. I stood near the display, wearing a simple, elegant dark emerald green gown. My hair was swept up in a classic chignon, and on my wrist, the emerald bracelet Mom had left me caught the light. "You look beautiful, Rose," Calvin said, walking up to me and handing me a glass of champagne. His eyes were warm, filled with a deep, quiet devotion that carried no shadows of the past. "Thank you, Calvin," I smiled, clinking my glass against his. "For everything. The Salt Group's international expansion plan has just been approved," he whispered, leaning down. "We're going to Paris next month. If you're coming with me." I looked at my ring finger, where a beautiful custom-cut emerald ring, a gift from Calvin to celebrate our studio's success, reflected the bright, warm sun of my new life. "Only if you're holding the umbrella, Calvin," I laughed. And as the music played in the grand showroom, I let my gaze drift up to the endless, bright blue sky outside the window. The cage of my past had been completely destroyed, and the future was finally beautifully mine.